the Dr. Walter McAfee Scholarship in Science, a way to allow for McAfee's legacy to continue to live on and promote access to the sciences by underrepresented students. I'm thrilled to let everybody know that the scholarship has now been endowed with both gifts and pledges. And many of the people who have made that endowment possible are on my screen right now. And it's really thrilling to see you here and thank you in person and to launch the kickoff really of this scholarship and the effects that it will ripple on with. So let's start the program with my colleague, Walter Grayson, who is the chair of the Department of Education Leadership and Counseling. Dave.
Thank you so much, Dean. This is an amazing day. Years of work and countless hours have gone into making it possible for us to get together. Thank you to Professor Ziobro, Karen Keene, to all the folks who have brought forward so much information about Dr. McAfee's life. And for me, it's most amazing because it really just started with basic research. I happened to be in the university library back in it was winter. It was just about this time of year, a little bit earlier, January of 2017. And I was going through old yearbooks, and an older African-American's picture kept appearing through the late 50s and 1960s and early 1970s, but his name was never listed. And so I was mystified. It's like, who is this faculty member in electrical engineering that there's no other sign or marker about what he was doing or how he was contributing to the university? And in the course of trying to dig around and find it, and really much thanks to Professor Ziobro, her work on Fort Monmouth is absolutely spectacular, and she just hints at it with the background that she has up today. But the work to kind of document the idea of the scientists and leaders at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, helped me to answer the question that this legendary scientist, Walter McAfee, had been on and part of the Monmouth University faculty for 15, 16 years at the height of the civil rights movement. And so for me to start to introduce him today and why his life and legacy carries so much importance, I do have to start with the work that I've done on the history of New Jersey and particularly the area around Monmouth University, is that it wasn't always a place dedicated to equal rights and equal justice for everyone. There's a really profound moment in the 1920s when the Ku Klux Klan dominated the Jersey Shore. And so to look that just a generation later, that someone like Dr. McAfee could come and become a major contributor to what the Monmouth College was attempting to accomplish, it's a major breakthrough that comes out of the 1947 revision of the New Jersey State Constitution. And so that piece of how we kind of built the momentum to get to the place where he could do this work starts with his extraordinary life, that his mother had been denied the ability to become a teacher when he was a very small child. But at home, essentially homeschooling himself and his siblings, she broke through and made them extraordinary thinkers, ambitious scholars, people who would go on to achieve degrees in sciences at the peak of Jim Crow. And so at Wiley College in 1934, Walter McAfee graduated with a degree in mathematics. He would go on and 3 years later achieve a degree, master's in, I believe it was physics. Let me make sure I'm saying that correctly. Yeah, Master of Science in Physics from Ohio State University, and then went on to go about a decade later in 1949 to get his PhD in physics from Cornell University. And so it was that decade from 1936 to 1949 where we don't often think about the contributions of African-American scientists that really grow out of the Second New Deal and a lot of the initiatives that Franklin Roosevelt had put together. But when we look at Camp Evans and the Signal Laboratory, and particularly what makes McAfee famous is the moon bounce experiment, the ability to figure out the speed of the moon relative to the Earth, and then both to transmit a radio signal through the atmosphere, but also to anticipate when it would come back and how to receive that signal. That then opens the door to what we now think of as the space age. It was going beyond simple potential satellite communications and radio communications. A lot of the time he was at Monmouth, there were questions that he was answering through mathematics about missile guidance and about questions of combat theater communications. And so most of what we understand as the military strength of the United States through the Cold War, in many ways can be traced back to his skill in mathematics and physics, and of course, all of his contemporaries and colleagues, the teams of people who were able to pull together the technological advantages that helped the United States win the Cold War in the second half of the 20th century. But for particularly today, in celebrating Black History Month at Monmouth University, he was not the first African-American faculty. There was another member at Fort Monmouth who had taught for 1 year as an adjunct. But as a long-standing member of the faculty in that period, Walter McAfee represents a symbolic breakthrough that really wouldn't be matched until the hiring of Julius Adekunle in the late 1990s to join the history department. Walter McAfee set the standard for an inclusive faculty and educational experience that foreshadowed generations of African Americans breaking through in the early 1970s and 1980s to become Monmouth University students and Monmouth University graduates. And so despite the kind of anonymity in the official record that our yearbooks offer, this is an occasion to celebrate his unique, distinctive, and powerful transformation of our university's history. And so we can talk through some of the details of the year-to-year work and how it complemented a lot of the work that he did as a scientist at Camp Evans and at Fort Monmouth, how he is honored by the fort when he retires, the university honoring him with a degree, honorary doctorate in 1985. But it's that window that I like to focus on from 1958 to 1976, that the world was completely changed in terms of the opportunities for future generations. And he was a huge part of what made it possible, what made folks reevaluate and think that no matter where you came from, what your ancestry was, what your skin color or your hair texture was, if you could do the job, if you could expand opportunity and expand the possibilities for other people, there was a chance to move us all forward together. And Dr. McAfee is the definition of that idea. So at this point, I want to turn the spotlight to Professor Ziobro, who will talk a great deal about the work in oral history that we've begun to kind of honor and document this story that might have otherwise been forgotten.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Grayson. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Professor Ziobro. I am our Specialist Professor of Public History. I also have the dubious distinction of being the last command historian at Fort Monmouth before the base closed. So I've known about Dr. McAfee's work since I started my time there in 2004. So just personally, as a Monmouth University alum myself, the last command historian at Fort Monmouth, this is truly a labor of love for me. So let me share, before I jump into the oral histories, if I can, just one more, I think, unique story about how Dr. McAfee comes to Monmouth County, right? Dr. Grayson ably noted that Dr. McAfee is one of the very few African Americans earning advanced degrees in physics at the time. But still, an advanced degree did not mean a job was assured by any means, right? So McAfee recalls in a 1994 oral history interview that he sits for that several government agencies initially rebuffed his attempts to gain employment. He assumes based on his race. This was not something he could hide during the application process, as most applications required a photograph. Fort Monmouth, according to McAfee, did not. So he receives instructions to report to the base here in central New Jersey almost immediately after submitting his paperwork. He resigns from a steady teaching job in order to do so, despite these fears he has that he might be turned away once he gets here and fort officials discover his race. But those fears dissipate when McAfee arrives at the fort and finds a number of African American scientists already at work. Though he's secured this employment, he still has to deal with off-post segregation and discrimination that makes it difficult to get housing and meals. And then there is, of course, interpersonal discrimination that he must battle on base as well. As McAfee describes it in his oral history interview, if they had one position and had a Black man and a white man competing for it, the white man got it. Mainly, there's less friction that way. The Black man isn't going to fight that hard. Of course, today you would never say that. I guess we were just getting into the jobs, end quote. But McAfee perseveres. And not only does he do this incredible work himself, I mean, we always think about Project Diana when we think about McAfee, but he works there for the fort for some 4 decades. Not only does he amass this wonderful body of work that, is leaps and bounds in American scientific advancements, but he chooses to take his time to come over to Monmouth College and to help prepare a new generation of scholars, which I think is just so incredibly inspirational. So with that, why the oral history interviews that we've embarked on? So before the McAfee interviews started, we already had what's called the Monmouth Memories Oral History Program. This is first proposed in 2014. It's a long-term open-ended effort to capture and preserve the organizational heritage of Monmouth University. The program's a product of the Department of History and Anthropology and the Monmouth University Library. Interviews are usually conducted by me, but oftentimes they are conducted by our oral history students, and those, of course, are the best ones. They conduct interviews as a capstone project in our oral history class. A lot of universities have programs like this. We're not a trailblazer in any means. But the really exciting part, and what makes it particularly relevant to today's conversation, is that the team assembled here today, Karen and Stephen and Dave, reached out to me about ways to promote McAfee's legacy on campus. And I immediately thought, let's try to find his students, right? How better to find out more about him as a person, find out how he impacted Monmouth, than to find those students and to speak with them. So that's what we're trying to do. So how do these interviews work? We're currently doing the interviews on the computer via Zoom for everyone's safety during these COVID times. The Zoom platform is free and simple to use. Interviews generally take an hour, no more than 2. We always discuss this in advance because we want to be respectful of everyone's time, certainly. We talk a little bit about the interviewee or the narrator's early life, their time at Monmouth, if applicable, their career, and then McAfee specifically. I say their time at Monmouth, if applicable, because we are interviewing former students and also people who might have worked at the fort with McAfee and can speak to him as a colleague, speak to his reputation in the field. All of the recordings from these interviews are saved, and funds permitting, we hope to get them transcribed because transcriptions are incredibly useful to researchers in the long term. The interviews will be accessible via the university library and hopefully for generations to come. Thus far, we're just getting into this new phase of Monmouth Memories. We've interviewed 3 gentlemen, Brian Charnick, John Waters, and Gary Barnett. We are in the process of scheduling several more interviews as we speak. Every single narrator has a unique story to tell. Sometimes I reach out to people about doing an oral history and they say, oh, I'm not important. I don't have a story to tell. Everyone has a unique story to tell. And even the most reluctant narrators, usually once they start talking, really are like, oh, yes, I do. I have good stories to tell, For example, one of our interviewees, John Waters, he was talking about how, he was in the 8th grade and he wanted to go to the moon, and he's trying to calculate how far it is and what the distance would be. And he said in his interview, well, then the Diana radar did it in 2 or so seconds. And that was the beginning of the space age, right? So we could hear from someone who lived through this experience, what it meant to them, how it inspired them. Another interviewee I mentioned, Mr. Charnick, he talks about how Dr. McAfee was responsible on base. He was the clearinghouse for patents. That is, if scientific personnel on base had an idea for a patent, it would have to get approved by Dr. McAfee because it had to be legitimate, right, before it left the base. And here, again, I've read Dr. McAfee's biography file, I can't tell you how many times since 2004, and I never knew that, right? So we're constantly going to be growing our knowledge base about Dr. McAfee. These interviews are going to be invaluable in helping us learn more about Dr. McAfee's life, his work, his legacy, all while, and this is really important too, capturing the key stories of the narrators themselves, because they're alumni, they're key personnel from the base. This is Monmouth County history, and we have a unique opportunity to preserve it. We hope to use these interviews too, right? When you do oral history interviews, you don't want to lock them away in your desk and let them collect dust. You want to use them for some good, right? And so we hope that in future events like today, we can use these interviews to inspire a future generation of scholars. So speaking of the next generation of scholars, if it's okay with Dr. Grayson, we'll introduce Vincent. Next up, we have one of my students, Vincent Saucelli. He had the opportunity to interview one of our alumni, Mr. Gary Barnett, who knew Dr. McAfee. So it's all yours, Vincent.
Hello, everybody. I'm Vincent Saucelli, and I spoke with Dr. McAfee, Mr. Barnett, about his time with Dr. McAfee as a student, and he described him as interesting and brilliant, and I thought this was a fair, description of Dr. McAfee based on his accomplishments in his career. He told me about his time working for Project Diana and the accomplishments he achieved there. One of the benefits he said, learning from Dr. McAfee and some other professors at Monmouth College at the time, was that being that these professors worked at Fort Monmouth and Bell Labs during the day and then taught classes at night, was that these physics majors and chemistry students could receive an education from these professors that was applicable, and they were able to use stuff for what they would be pursuing in their own careers after college. So that was something that they really enjoyed and were appreciative of at their time at Monmouth, because obviously when you go to school, you want to be educated. Awesome. You want to receive an education that you feel, is going to benefit you after you are no longer a student. So as I was saying, Mr. Barnett a couple of years ago wrote Monmouth University suggesting that our magazine include a section on professors or other individuals who were associated or worked with Monmouth and their accomplishments, kind of to give an idea to current students and current people around campus about, Monmouth's history and the accomplishments that some people have achieved throughout their careers and their time. So he thought Dr. McAfee would have been, a great candidate for a section like this. I think we can all agree on that. And when I asked him why, more specifically why he thought Dr. McAfee would be such a great candidate, to add to the reasons of what he did on Project Diana and the accomplishments he had that were revolutionary to the field of science and military and really just, so many aspects. What was mind-opening to me that really kind of went over my head and passed me was that while Dr. McAfee did all the amazing accomplishments throughout his career with his calculations and everything, he did it as a Black man in a time that, but also, inspirational. And, despite the amazing accomplishments he had, he still had to deal with the struggles of being an African American in a society that really wasn't accepting of people of his type. And to think about how he persevered regardless of the restrictions that society sort of put on him. I just thought that was really a truly inspirational story, and it's something that we could still apply to ourselves today, and that you shouldn't let ideas of the world or other people hold you back from doing what it is you can do and are meant to do in this life and in this world.
Thank you so much, Vincent, and especially persevering through our technical difficulties. That was spectacular. So the work is just beginning, and we have taken a lot of steps forward, but the main purpose for today's event, beyond celebrating Dr. McAfee's life, is to bring together the people who want to continue that legacy, that so much of the work lies ahead of us, that the breakthroughs that we saw during his time up until the early 80s and even his passing in the 90s, there was so much that was unfolding, but we have so much more opportunity today. And so with that, I did want to pass it along. I'm hopeful we have a special guest, surprise guest planned for everyone. Dr. Verma McAfee Williams from Rice University.
That's Dr. Velma McAfee Williams.
Thank you so much. Dr. Williams, go for it.
Oh, is he calling on me at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm to more or less what give some ideas of growing up with my brother.
Yes.
Talk
Is
about
that
your
it,
life and
right?
relationship is wonderful.
Okay, my life and relationship. That's very interesting. There were 9 of us. He was number 2 and I was number 8. So you see, he was second born and I was next to last born. And so he left home before I was starting school. And I told Mercedes and Marsha on one occasion, I met your dad. I was grown when I met your father. Because I did not, I grew up through letters. I grew up with him through when my mom would write letters to him. I would also have an opportunity to write letters. I heard someone at the very beginning give the story of his life, almost about his education and everything, and when he left home to go for his master's. And so when after he received his master's degree, he went to work at a high school in Ohio, and he came home at one point. In other words, between leaving home to go get his master's and after he received it, he did not come home again until he was teaching. And he came home at Christmas. Well, he had a lot of contemporary brothers, 2, one on each side of him. So he had kind of spent most time with getting reacquainted with his older siblings. So I was still a little bit too young then to get to really know him. But through these letters that I wrote, I would always be telling him about what I was doing in school and everything. And on one occasion, I remember I said when I came home from school each day, I did my homework because I couldn't see at night. And so then he was teaching, so he told my mom to take me to have my eyes examined, and he bought my first glasses when I was about 9 or 10 years old. Then the next time I saw him, I was married, and he was married and had two daughters, two big daughters, two girls. And he came home, and we had a family reunion. So that was really the first time I got a chance to speak with him. We were both adults at that point. By that point, everybody was adults in the family by that time. But, I skipped. Before then, when I was in high school, when I graduated from high school, that was the great impression that he made on me when he wrote to congratulate me on graduating high school and to tell me what the difference in the education process would be when I went to college, how I had to take greater responsibility for my own learning process, my own education. And at one point in the letter, the statement that stayed with me throughout my schooling was that I should not confuse hazy impressions with knowledge. I should learn well and not confuse hazy impressions with knowledge. And so that was to me, that was a great statement. It saw me at that point. Through college, I knew exactly what I had to do in regard to what it meant to become educated. And then, of course, the next time, then like I said, the first time I really met him and spent time with him, I was married, and we had a family reunion, and everybody came home for the family reunion. And then after that, a couple of years later, I went to Chicago and received a master's degree at DePaul University. And he came to my graduation. And I went to work at Argonne National Lab for a couple of years. And then my husband and I returned to Texas. And then we saw each other more then because actually nobody was flying in those early days in the 30s and 40s, except people who were in the military. Civilians were riding trains and buses, so nobody got around then the way travel became. And so I saw him quite a bit then from, I guess I began to see him quite often from the time we had the first reunion, I guess, which would have been in '52 until all the way up till. So I went, and we went to New Jersey also a couple of times. I took my children, my children, when we went to New Jersey and visited with them. And then of course, it became a habit to see Mercedes and Marcia over the years. But as my brother said about our education, we kind of had school at home throughout all the years that we were growing up. Our mother and dad made sure that they filled in whatever we may have been missing out on at school. And they also prepared us for school before we went to school. And so my brother continued. Especially while we were living in Chicago. My husband and I lived 3 years, and while I was in grad school there and working at Argonne, I saw him quite a bit while I was in Chicago.
Dr. Williams, that's extraordinary. You're filling in many blanks that we want to learn so much more about. I also wanted to give a chance for you to tell us about your work as well. The entire family really is an astonishing, miraculous kind of story. So could you tell us about the things that you've done?
Like I said, I've worked at Argonne. I was in reactor research, and I was in shielding. I was concerned with. I was working with engineers and concerning shielding for reactors, the best materials to shield reactors with, so that we did not have leakage, when you built the reactors of radioactive materials. then after I returned to Texas, I went to Wiley College and taught math at Wiley College for 3 years, and then Then we moved to Houston, and I came to TSU. I taught at Texas Southern University and at University of St. Thomas.
Spectacular. Thank you. As you look back over the years and what the family was able to do, both you and Walter McAfee, were there lessons that we should take away, things that as educators and scientists ourselves that we should be striving to kind of focus on in the decades ahead?
I'm sorry, would you say that question again?
How can we best support the legacy and the values that your family stands for?
Are you talking about in terms of helping oncoming generations? Is that what you mean?
Yes, indeed.
In terms of motivating oncoming generations, well, I think you should, in terms of helping them to continue. Well, on one occasion, we went to we were given another family reunion in 2012 at Aberdeen, where Fort Monmouth program was moved, and there's a building, there's a whole big complex in Aberdeen that's named for my brother. And so now they have and so as a result of that, in an interview there, I suggested that having internships and things for college and students and graduate students there would be an important way to expose, to make opportunities for young people in college to get to know about the work that goes on at Fort Monmouth, and that my brother was very, I guess perhaps we all are, very instrumental and very concerned about young people having exposure to and having the knowledge to know what is available and what could be available to them. And so, and that was how the reunion grew out, because of the concern that I expressed that my brother had for his progeny, as well as his nieces, his nephews, and everybody else coming along after. And that was why and so the youngest person we had on that reunion, I think, was probably 8 or 9 years old, a young man who had made an exhibit for his Black History exhibit that year, and he had done it on my brother. But so I believe in exposing young people to summer activities that help them to, that are different just from going to regular school, but opportunities in the summer, enrichment opportunities that help them to see what they can be exposed to. And I think that parents need to pay attention also to what their children are learning in school and what is being taught and how they can further motivate the students if they need that. And so, and like I said, Fort Monmouth, they do have the research things now, because in fact Rice University goes there and does goes there every summer and does recruiting and does and has students who go there for internships. So Fort
Mommy,
Monmouth.
that's at Aberdeen. You're saying Fort Monmouth, but the summer
I don't mean
college.
Fort Monmouth. I mean Aberdeen. I meant Aberdeen has that program.
We were
Yeah,
following.
Rice goes to Aberdeen every summer. I don't mean Fort Monmouth.
Yes, ma'am. We got you. I did notice that the president of Monmouth University also joined our conversation today. His current camera's off. I didn't know if he might click back on and say a word or two to those gathered. We couldn't do any of this without his leadership and vision.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And in fact, last summer, I know my brother taught at Monmouth while he was working he taught at Monmouth University while he was working at Fort Monmouth. Well, while he was working at Fort Monmouth. Yeah, I knew he taught there, and I think he may have even been on the board at one time. At one point too, he was on the board at Fort Monmouth, at Monmouth College, I think.
That was Brookdale, I think.
Brookdale, okay.
Oh, that was Brookdale. Okay. I got all these, maybe when my brother would be telling me and talking about these deals, maybe I was getting, Brookdale was a college in what? In Fort Monmouth, in Belmont.
Oh, just up the street in Lincroft.
Yes.
Right. We're getting
and
up.
We were scheduled. We discovered the actual location of the Diana Project 2 summers ago. In August 2019, when they named the post office for him, and so we were driving around. We were actually trying to go out to Fort Monmouth to see the building that was the original building. I was taking some people out there, but the GPS sent us to Diana. I never knew it was there, but we were so pleased to run across it, and so we went back. It was closed. I mean, it was closed that day, and we simply saw it. But the next day we went back and had earlier earlier enough to go in, and they were very, very pleased to meet Dr. McAfee's family. The lady said she did not think that she would ever live the day to meet Dr. McAfee's family. So anyway, we were very pleased, and they scheduled us another family reunion for June 2000. But that one didn't play out because COVID-19 said you stand at home this time.
Yep. Yeah,
So
gotcha.
they'll probably reschedule it for another time whenever COVID-19 gets through, whenever we can travel again.
Yes, indeed. We'd love to have you here at the university.
Yes, I would love that too. I would love to come on out while we were there at the Diana, visiting the Diana Project. We had a chance to go in and see a lot of stuff there, just the 3 of us who were there at that time. And so they wanted to do something to include a larger amount of the family and to actually put on a program for us.
Well, Dr. Williams, I wanted to ask a couple of your family members if they could introduce themselves to our group. I know Yvonne Boyd has spoken a little, so she could unmute and maybe tell us who else from Dr. McAfee's family is with us today.
Yvonne, did you unmute?
I unmuted. I think Mercedes may have some more idea as to who's here. I know my daughter Emily is here. She lives in New York. And
Diane McAfee?
Diane is Mercedes.
My fault.
Oh, yes. In New Jersey, I'm actually Mercedes. In California, I'm Diane.
Leisha, I think Leisha may be here. Is Leisha here? Did Leisha join?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. And it was Leisha's son.
Yes, so Ryan and Taylor are on as well.
Yeah. So
Ryan, really? Where?
Yeah.
And
Cecilia?
Cecilia's on?
Yes, Cecilia's here.
Did Leo join?
Yes, I saw Leo somewhere.
And Claude Taylor?
Don't forget your cousin Melba.
Melba is
Oh,
here.
Melba Robinson, yes.
Yeah.
Patricia is here. Patricia
is here.
McAfee Owens.
Oh,
Leo
hi,
is here.
Hi.
Leo's here. Hi,
I see
Leo.
Benjamin Taylor.
Yeah. Cecilia and Benjamin and LaRue.
Ruth here.
And LaRue.
And LaRuth.
Oh, LaRuth is here also. Hi, LaRuth.
I think we've qualified for the family reunion. The university pulled it off by Zoom.
Benita Taylor's on also.
Oh, hi, Benita.
That was a leading question.
Yeah, almost family is Lizelle Westbrook.
Yes, hi.
Yes,
Lorenzo is on.
Oh, good.
that's Marsha's husband.
Bobo.
We are so honored to have all of you here with us, and please stay in contact, follow up, emails, phone calls, and we'd love to get you here all together in person.
This is just the start, and with all of you here, it feels like we couldn't have asked for a stronger one. So thank you all for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you.
We had a little time
honoring my
for
father in this way.
we had a little bit of time for questions and answers. So if folks wanted to try and connect and talk about or comment stories that you'd like to share.
Well, just one more thing. I was the first black female to attend Rice University and graduate in the math program. I don't know about anything else, but in the math, I was the first black female in the graduate program at Rice.
Thank you for the courage and strength. We need to follow your example.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, gonna look at the chat. We have a couple thanks. And then again, thank you to President Leahy for being a part of the conversation today. He's quite busy, number of priorities he's probably juggling this minute, but I know he's just thrilled and honored that everyone came together here. Are any of the students, Dr. McAfee's on the call?
Yes, I was a student.
Yes, Mr. Boyle, tell us about what you studied with him.
I believe it was 1967. I got my BSW in 1968, and I had Dr. McAfee for solid state electronics. And as I recall, it was at night.
Yeah, he mostly taught at night.
Yeah, I was down to, my last, 10 credits or something, and I had to take two semesters of solid state electronics, and I was working during the day at frequency engineering, finishing up my degree, and my memories of Dr. McAfee is he was a very calm, undisturbable kind of person. He was brilliant. He was an excellent teacher. And what I learned and experienced during that class, I was able to use in my professional career, because I went on to a professional career at Raytheon Corporation. So those are kind of my memories. It's been over 50 years, so it's a little bit hazy. But I do want to recognize him and thank his family and anyone who was associated with him for having the opportunity to have him be my teacher.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boyle.
Okay.
I see Gus just popped up.
Yes, my name is Gus Kamnikis, and I'm the first foreign student in Monmouth College.
Oh.
In 1962. And I'm also a distinguished alumnus of the year 1985.
1985.
Outstanding.
Distinguished alumnus.
I graduated in 1966 with a BSc. And one thing you might want to know is that Dr. McAfee was recruited by Dr. Jacobs. I was very heavily involved in the engineering department because I was a foreign student.
I had him too. Yeah.
I had no place to go, so I was actually sticking in the labs where they were all working together. I never had Dr. McAfee as my teacher, but I was in the labs where Dr. Jacobs and McAfee and Dick Benjamin were doing laser work. And it was interesting to see how brilliant both of these individuals, Jacobs and McAfee, were talking. And I was sitting in the corner listening. Incredible individuals talking with state-of-the-art things that, you know, at the time were all pure fantasies, but they were doing actually in the lab at Monmouth College, inside Monmouth College.
Outstanding.
Yeah, I remember that.
He was so
I
brilliant
remember
that you just sat back and listened to him talking. Very much. And I remember once some of the students in his class, in one of the solid state class, around 63 or 64, he did something in the solid state engineering class, like this gentleman was talking about. He tried to prove a theorem, and it was so elegant that the whole class stood up and applauded. And you can imagine all night students, because the classes were after 7 o'clock at night. And the reason I never took Dr. McAfee was it was too late. He was coming around 8 o'clock, I think 7, 8 o'clock. And Dr. Jacobs, who was teaching similar courses, the same courses, was a little earlier. So because I couldn't walk from Monmouth to Oceanport, it was too late for me. I used to take Dr. Jacobs, and we developed, of course, a very close relationship with Dr. Jacobs. So McAfee was an incredible teacher, an incredible individual, respected highly by everybody in the engineering department. And anytime he talked, I was listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful to learn. Thank you.
Dr. Greason?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if there are other students that are online and would like to speak, but I would like to just make another connection of influence that Uncle Walter had on our time this afternoon. Dr. Leo Cecil McAfee, the Junior, he's Junior, is a part of, is with us. And Leo, my cousin, is the first African-American engineering professor at Michigan. He's retired, he's emeritus. And Uncle Walter was a big influence in his life. And I don't know if Leo, you want to say something. I hope I didn't put you on the spot, Leo.
Please do, my goodness.
I mentioned that a big influence for me was when my father, who was principal of this elementary school that I was attending, in about 1955, 56, I was like 5th, 6th grade, something like that at the time. My father came in waving this news article, newspaper clipping. Now, this is my father. He didn't tell us about this at home. He told us about this at school. I guess that's the kind of parents that my mother and father were. But anyway, he came in waving this article, and it was about Uncle Walter being named one of the 3 recipients of the Rosenwald Fellowship, I believe. I've learned since. So anyway, at the time, I was really excited about that. And at that point, it occurred to me, I said, you know, I might be able to be a scientist myself, not knowing what a scientist was, not knowing the type of work. All I knew in the South, in Texas at the time, was what teachers did. That was the profession that I grew up around. But anyway, at that time, it was enough influence on me to say, hey, I should be able to get a PhD also. And so that did last for, well, it's lasted through lifetime at this point. I got to know Uncle Walter began to get to know Uncle Walter in 1965. I went to work in his summer job, one of the summer interns that Aunt Belma talked about. I went to work there in Poughkeepsie, New York. And the small world story is that I learned in August that Lorenzo Morris lived in Poughkeepsie. He grew up in Poughkeepsie, not knowing until 2018 that this small world connection existed. But anyway, I went there, and Uncle Walter And I communicated, and he invited me to come down for a weekend. Well, this old country boy didn't know how to ride the trains and the buses and things to get down to New Jersey. So Uncle Walter came to pick me up at the time, brought me back to his home with he and Aunt Viola. And I spent a very nice, comfortable weekend getting to know him, and I learned the seriousness of his accomplishments and the seriousness of, not his accomplishment, but the seriousness that he approached working at the time. And I got to be careful. I'm going to talk like Aunt Velma if I keep going.
What'd you say, Leo?
I said I'm going to be talking as long as you do if I keep going. Once we turn you on, we don't stop. I guess that's the thing. But anyway, I got to get to know him, and Aunt Vi was just a wonderful host, taking care of us at the time. But throughout that summer of 1965, Uncle Walter and I got to know each other enough, and he offered to have me transfer from the school I was attending to come to Monmouth University as a student. He thought that the education that I would get at Monmouth University would be really more substantial, more fundamental than what I was getting at the school, Prairie View A&M University in Texas at the time. And I told him at the time that I was close enough that in the next year, I thought I'd be going off to grad school. And so, he offered to have me transfer. He and Aunt Vi were going to pay my tuition and living expenses. So that was the generosity of his offer. It wasn't just a kind of a verbal statement. He made a real commitment there. But anyway, I was able to get go off to grad school in the next year, and eventually I got the PhD at the University of Michigan in electrical engineering. Now, during all this time, he was talking about nuclear physics and stuff like that, which I knew nothing about. So he would have it was one-way conversation basically when he talked about that. But I thought I knew something about semiconductor physics. You know, that was my area. And so we did have some interesting conversations about semiconductor physics. And I found out, I said, this man knows more about semiconductor physics than I do. And I thought that was my area. Well, I learned that he also taught semiconductor physics at Monmouth College, Monmouth University at the time. So he was quite an influence on my life. And during my early career stages, he would come out to Michigan to oversee some of his research project grants. And he would advise me and counsel me about things to do as a new faculty member at the University of Michigan. And so he was quite an influence and quite a tutor, tutored this old intern, if you will, during those days.
Yes, sir.
And so like I guess Yvonne said, I was the first African-American on the professorial track in the College of Engineering at the university. That's not the University of Michigan. That's just one of the 12 or so, 15 colleges at the University of Michigan. But I was in the College of Engineering. And so I retired 10 years ago now.
Spectacular. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do. That was our time for today. And I know we could go for a couple more hours, but I do want to encourage us all to get back together and do this more regularly. It's a pleasure. Thank you to everyone, Dean Backrack, Dr. Rago Kraft, that made everything happen and come together. Please stay in touch, reach out to us by email. If you just get in touch with any one of us, we'll continue to build new programs and make things happen for the next generation of students. It's a pleasure to celebrate Black History Month with all of you here at Monmouth University.